I'm Chip Rogers, and welcome to the AAHOA Educational Experience. Thanks for being with us this week. My guests are Marian Vessels, the director of the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center. Marian, thank you for being here. And Cleo King, who is Senior Vice President with the United Spinal Association. Cleo, thank you for being here. We talked in previous shows about some of the challenges that hotel owners in particular have with making sure they're in compliance with the ADA, which is a civil rights law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, passed back in 1990, became law, I guess, in 1991. So it's been around for some time. No excuses really for not being in compliance, right? And before we get into reservations, which is one thing I want to talk about, it struck me, and we were talking about this before we started this segment, but training and education. I mean, if you could just get good training and proper education for both customers and business owners, it seems like you would avert so many problems.
Absolutely. A lot of guests may feel that they have more rights than they do. But on the other side, a lot of hoteliers don't train front staff about knowing how to greet a guest, how to work with a guest. Something as simple as lowering the front counter, which is required, so that you can do face-to-face with someone seated or someone with short stature. Knowing how to guide a guest who is blind to find their room and to find their way around the hotel. Housekeeping things to make sure that the rooms are fully usable by people with disabilities. There's a lot of things. Allowing a service animal into the facility. And with some simple training, a lot of problems could be averted, right, and you exemplify great customer service.
Let us delve into the topic for this week's show, this segment, and that is reservations. Tell us about this, and is this changing with the new update to the law?
These are huge, huge changes for hotels. Hotel chains have changed their whole system, but many independents may not be aware of some of these major changes that are required. And there's really 5 basic requirements. The first one is that an individual with a disability must be able to book their hotel room just like everyone else. So if you allow people to book through the website, book over the phone, and book through a 24-hour reservation party system, third parties, if you put some of your rooms in Travelocity or other groups, a person with a disability has to be able to do that as well. So that means if you have a requirement to have 2 guest rooms that are accessible with a tub, then you need to list those on your website, and people need to be able to reserve those specific rooms, and they need to be able to have enough information to be able to do that. So the first one is you've got to be able to make sure that system is fully accessible to all people with disabilities. And right now, most systems aren't. They're just now coming into compliance. So
with so many rooms being booked through third-party vendors, what are known as OTCs, online travel companies, Expedia, and so on, you have to have that listed even through that third-party vendor, correct? And is there any liability on the part of the third-party vendor?
It's a great question. You are required, when you give Travelocity or Orbitz or whoever a block of rooms, you have to assure that there is some of the accessible features. And you can't just give them regular rooms. You have to have an accessible room in the mix, or a portion thereof. There is limited liability for the third parties, because if they're not given information correctly from the hotel, right, they can't adequately represent it to the guest with a disability. So there is, kind of a catch-22, because you're not sure exactly, when you're going through the third party. So we recommend a lot of people would call the hotel property itself just to make sure that they're getting what they expected. But that third party system has to be accessible as well.
You said there are 5 changes in reservation practices. You've given us one, and that's a big one.
Right. The second one is something that we've kind of alluded to, and you must know the accessible features of each of your rooms. So it's not acceptable to say, oh, we've got a roll-in shower in one of our rooms. We have in room 331, we have a roll-in shower with 2 queen beds. And the roll-in shower has this features, and et cetera, et cetera. You have to be able to adequately describe all of the features that the hotel has and the room has, so somebody can make an educated decision. They may decide that they really want a king-size bed, and that's more important than a roll-in shower. So they'll take the king-size bed with an accessible tub, as long as they know there's grab bars around the toilet and those kind of features that they need. So you have to be able to describe in enough detail. So it's not acceptable to say we've got one tub and and that's it, we're done.
I want to ask Cleo about that. Doesn't that really get back to proper training for your employees? I mean, they need to know what rooms are available and what those rooms actually include, right?
Right. And up till now with the new standard, we've always told people, if you call a hotel, don't call the 800 number because you're not necessarily speaking to the property. Call the property itself, and if the reservationist doesn't know, ask to speak to maybe head of housekeeping or head of facilities and ask those questions. Now individuals with disabilities won't have to do that because the reservationist will have all that information. So one thing hotel owners should be doing is making sure the reservationists do have all that information. Have a cheat sheet. If they have 10 accessible rooms in a huge hotel in, say, Las Vegas or something, they're going to have to know those 10 rooms and what each of them has, as well as the overall hotel's features.
We've got just a few minutes left in this segment, but I'm just kind of thinking through what potential problems could arise. Let's say you had 10 accessible rooms, and you're a very busy hotel, which is a great problem to have, and you rent out 9 of those accessible rooms, and then someone comes in and wants to rent a room, but you don't have any rooms left except that 10th accessible room. And I guess you're allowed to put them in that accessible room, correct? But then what happens if somebody shows up that needs that accessible room? I mean,
okay, rule number 3?
Rule number 3
is you have to hold back all of your accessible guest rooms until all rooms of that type. So if you're talking about a single room with a queen bed and it's got an accessible tub in it, that room with the accessible tub has to be the last one sold. Now if you're totally sold out, then you can sell that room to anybody. But you can see why you'd need to hold back so that somebody with a disability who needs those features has the same access to be able to rent a room.
What if someone has, you rent a room, you rent that room, and then they have an extended stay, and then a non-accessible room comes open, and then someone who needs the room they're in shows up?
Well, we recommend that hoteliers say that you're an accessible room, and if we have a guest and if you extend your stay, we're going to ask you to move to a non-accessible room so that we can put somebody in that room.
Are there any legal implications to that?
The regulations don't address that specifically, other than they do, as Marian had said, if an individual with a disability wants to rent the room, you rent it to them, of course, but you can't release any rooms to people without disabilities until that class of room is sold out. So I think it would be a best practice to tell somebody, we've given you the accessible room. If a room of the same type with all the same features that's not accessible does come available, we're going to place you there.
Right. It goes back to training again, doesn't it?
It does.
It's so important. All right, we have made it through 3 of these 5 changes in reservation practices that are so important. We've got that to talk about, the last 2, and a few more things before we finish this show, but we do need to take a time out. So join us coming up right after this. I'm Chip Rogers, and welcome back to the AAHOA Educational Experience. My guests this week, Marian Vessels, Director of the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center. Marian, and thank you for being with us. And Cleo King with the United Spinal Association. We've made it halfway through, or a little over halfway through, our 5 changes in reservation practices under the new regulations. The first 3 were big. What are the last 2?
You must reserve the accessible room that guest decides they want. If it's the queen bed with the accessible tub, you must reserve that specific room. Even if you never do that for anyone else, you must be able to reserve that specific room because you may not have a lot of those combinations. So that guest will know that they will get that room. And that's a huge change for hoteliers.
Are there pricing issues? This struck me. Are there pricing differences? Are you allowed to have pricing differences for these rooms? Or how do you go about pricing it?
You can't price an accessible room any different than you do that whole class. So if you charge $199 for a queen mini suite, then you can't charge more than $199 for the accessible queen mini suite.
Right. And I guess for standard operations, you know, kind of what we call cookie cutter, maybe they don't like that term, but for standard hotels that are built over and over again, what if you have a boutique hotel? I mean, does the pricing issue come into play there with the accessible rooms?
It would be the same if you price all your rooms with, say, the view to the street, and you're in Manhattan and you can see Times Square. Right. Your accessible rooms with that view would be the same price, and then the ones that are in the back alley you may price differently. Right. So again, it's whatever you price the comparable non-accessible room as. And you also need to spread your accessible rooms throughout your different categories. So if you have suites, junior suites, rooms with 2 beds, rooms with king beds, rooms with queen beds, you have to distribute your accessible rooms among those various types.
Okay. Number 5.
You must guarantee that that specific room will be held. So that means you're gonna pull it once they've decided on it. You pull it from the reservation, so nobody else can do it. And you're going to guarantee that that specific room is held for that specific guest. So it's going to be a huge change. You don't normally remove a room from the reservations. You just know that you're going to have so many people coming in that want a queen suite. This one you're going to say, no, room 342 is your room. We're removing it from the inventory and we're holding it specifically for you.
Does this create challenges for hotel owners who have a vast majority of their reservations come through an online system or a third-party operator? I mean, if in a way they're almost ceding control of how the reservations happen because they're either happening electronically or a third-party person's doing it. I mean, does that create an issue for those hotel owners?
There are systems that are being operated now and very efficiently. So there are ways that it can be programmed.
Right.
But again, if you're giving some of your block of rooms to a third party, you need to make sure that they fully understand what those accessible features are so they can identify those to those guests. And those guests can choose accordingly.
Let us segue to the segue. Different spellings. This was, I see these things all over. We were talking during the break that you see them particularly in Washington, D.C. with people doing tours, and I think it's a wonderful thing. How do you handle that as a property manager, an owner, somebody at the front desk with segways?
Some people are going to be using segways as their essentially wheelchair, as their other powered mobility device. Because there's some people who don't need to sit, but can stand, but can't walk long distances. And for many of the tourist venues, to get to and from places, especially a place like DC or New York, where there's a lot of walking involved, people will be using their Segway to come and go from the hotel. And you cannot say you have to park your Segway outside. It's a vehicle. It's not a mobility device. And the law is very clear that it's now can be considered a mobility device. You can put limits on it. You can say, you know, if it's really, really crowded, you'll need to go at a very slow speed, etc. But you can't say you cannot come into this hotel.
So segways are actually protected.
Absolutely.
Interesting. Refrigerators. Tell us about, we all know what a refrigerator is, but tell us about the new standards involving refrigerators.
Well, some people may need refrigeration for medication. So as a modification of your policy, traditionally you probably don't have refrigerators in your room. you should be able to provide a refrigerator for a guest who, due to their disability, needs the accommodation of a refrigerator.
Is this, with respect to refrigerators, is that held at the same level as having an accessible room? I mean, could you, I guess you could just sell out of rooms that have refrigerators, but I mean, are you required to hold back rooms that have refrigerators?
Most places that I know either have refrigerators or they don't, but it's considered just a modification of your policy.
Okay.
So it would not, normally I would not say that a refrigerator is an accessible feature. It is just a modification of policy to allow somebody to essentially borrow a refrigerator for the time they're there to use it for their disability.
And tell us about modifying policies.
Okay. You may have a policy if you have no food in a certain area of the hotel, and you've got somebody with medication and they need to have water with them. A modification might be to allow that person who says, I'm sorry, but due to the medication I'm taking, I need to sip water constantly, to allow them to change, to allow them to do that, and you change your policy. There could be other policies and procedures. Some guests with vision disabilities need to understand how to use a card key.
Right.
Because the card keys can be very, even when you can see, they can
I
be very hard.
have a tough time with them.
And so you would modify the card key. Sometimes you put tape on one end so they'll know which end goes in or out. Sometimes you'll cut one end so that they'll know that the top right hand edge that's cut off. So that's modifying your policy or your practice or your procedure. Normally you wouldn't want your card key to be destroyed in that way, right, but it allows for the functionality of somebody with a disability. So you have to look at all your policies and practices. You might require to see someone's driver's license to assure that they are who they are. Now you can't ask for a driver's license. It has to be an ID card with a photo, because that's all you're really asking for. Are you who you say you are?
Right.
Because lots of people with disabilities don't drive. So we want to make sure that they have access to your hotel.
But you can
facilities.
still require a photo ID, correct?
A photo ID is what you're looking for, not a driver's license.
Right.
You really don't care if they drive.
Right. You, as a hotel owner, you just want them to show up at your front door, no matter if they walk, drive, swim, bike. Resources for training your staff. We've had this common theme over these 3 shows, and how do we get from here to there as it pertains to compliance, and training is so important. But you've got to have the resources to train your staff, and I would assume that any complaint level to get you from a legal standpoint, they're going to ask the question of the owner, did you dedicate resources for the purpose of training staff?
Yes, they will. And there's a lot of places folks can go to get training. Marion's organization has a great website for hospitality, which, give your website.
Right. I'm one of 10 centers around the country. We're called the ADA National Network, and we're funded by the U.S. Department of Education to provide information and training and resources on the ADA. And a year ago, we launched a website called adahospitality.org. And on that, we have lots of resources. We have pool fact sheets. We have trainings that you can download and use with your frontline staff tomorrow. So lots of resources there, fact sheets, kits, information. We also have an 800 number, 1-800-949-4232, that you can use around the country. And if you have any question around the Americans with Disabilities Act, we'll be able to help you and answer it for you. And we're regionally based, so we know folks in your
right.
neck of the woods and be able to assist you in getting localized assistance. Maybe somebody that would help you do some on-site training, maybe somebody that would be able to talk you through how do you assess your physical access, how do you make your pool accessible, what is the standard door width, all of those kind of things will be able to guide you to the proper documents you need to be using.
So really it's a resource for both individuals and business owners as well, correct?
Correct.
Absolutely.
And our organization partners with Marion's Mid-Atlantic as well as the Northeast ADA Center. And so United Spinal is also a resource, and we've done a lot of physical accessibility reviews and told hotel owners what they're lacking and how to come into compliance.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being here. This has been very informational. Cleo King with the United Spinal Association, thank you. And Marian Vessels, the director of the Mid-Atlantic ADA Centers. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to join our program each and every week, you need to do that. But if you'd like to contact me, you can do so via email, chip@ahoa.com. That's chip@ahoa.com. We'll see you again next week.